Welcome to Futureproof Business. Smart strategies, real insights, and tools to lead and scale in a fast-changing world. Let's future-proof your success.
Welcome to Futureproof Business Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Rosenstein. Today I have the honor of interviewing Dr. Daniel Brassell. Danny, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me, Daniel. More importantly, thanks for spreading some joy in the world. We need a lot more of you.
Thank you very much for that. Can you share with us, with the audience, a little bit about yourself, your background, what is it you do, so people get to know you a little bit?
Certainly. Thanks, Daniel. If I was going to write an autobiography, I think I'd probably call it Pivots, because I feel like I've already lived 9 lives. 30 years ago, I was a reporter. I had the privilege of covering President Bush Sr. in the 1992 presidential election. I loved my job. I got to meet every editor of every major daily. And one editor offered me the city beat for $16,500 a year. Meanwhile, a friend told me that they were hiring teachers in South Central Los Angeles in the inner city for $25,000 a year. So I became a teacher for the noblest of reasons, for the high pay. And I fell in love with teaching. I've actually taught all age levels, from preschoolers all the way up to rocket scientists. I can make that claim because I used to teach English as a second language to engineering students at the University of Southern California. And then in 2005, my wife and I attended a real estate seminar, which turned out to be a scam. And we lost everything. And I could give you the woe is me story, but I'm a positive person. I learned all kinds of things from that experience. First of all, my wife is my soulmate. I put her through the ringer and she stuck right by me. She's incredible. Second of all, I learned that money isn't everything, because you can lose it just like that. Third, I try not to judge other people, because if I was somebody who looked at what I had done, I would have said, well, you deserve that. But now I realize if you don't know everything about a person, you really don't know anything about a person. Fourth, I became a Christian, which I'm always ashamed to say and embarrassed to say, but the more I read the Bible, I'm not the first screw up to find Jesus. And fifth, and most importantly, I didn't want to file for bankruptcy. And my accountant said, well, you have to make this much more money in order to avoid bankruptcy. And so I started speaking on the side, and I hit his number right on the number. Then the next year, Daniel, he gave me a much higher number, and I hit that number right on the number. And so basically in year 3, I thought maybe I should set a higher number. And basically during one of the worst economic downturns in American history, I was able to build up a highly lucrative speaking business, which attracted the attention of a lot of people who wanted me to coach them, which I resisted at first, Daniel, because you need to know something about me. As a teacher and as a coach, I've always had a very high standard for my students. I will not let you fail. I'm going to stick to you and hold you accountable until you succeed. Now I primarily work with entrepreneurs and C-suite executives and small business owners, and I find that they're highly motivated. They do the work, and I've never had more fun in my life helping people basically create what I call well-crafted stories, presentations that you're going to deliver again and again to introduce yourself to new audiences to help get more clients and convert them. So that's the very long answer to your very short question.
It was great. Thank you. It's great to have a good introduction of a guest. We better know who you are and what you do. So can you maybe explain, as you said, you've done a lot of different jobs and careers. How's your background as a reporter and a teacher in education helped you become a better business leader?
Reading and writing are pretty important. The writing's been great. A lot of my clients, they want to write books. I've written 19 books, so I'm really helpful for them in terms of showing them how to get published or who to publish with, how to market your book and things like that. And reading, I think, is essential for everybody. I actually read a horrible book a couple of weeks ago, but there was one really good little anecdote in it. And so it was worth my time. And so reading has really always informed my storytelling. And when I'm working with difficult people, they claim they have no personal stories. I do always point out to them that one of the most successful personal development books of all time is Think and Grow Rich, in which Napoleon Hill shares no personal stories. What he did is he interviewed a whole bunch of millionaires and shares their stories. So there's different ways to captivate audiences so that they're interested in working with you further.
I love Napoleon Hill. I thought he was such a genius at that particular time. I think he was one of the pioneers in the self-help industry, writing a book about topics that I think back then very few people wrote about. Now it's there's so many self-help related books, and we have tons of speakers and coaches and mentorships and leaders talking about it. But back then he was one of the pioneers. So thank you for bringing him up, because he's actually one of my favorite authors. Actually, I saw one of his, there's a quick like movie on Amazon that shows him actually being interviewed in person.
Yeah.
Talk about like reading. I love to read, but it was actually very interesting to watch how he was filmed. I didn't know like they had that. And I was actually very impressed, even though the filmography was not at the, didn't have the technology that it did today with like AI and special effects. So they interviewed him, didn't have any of that, but he still gave, like, he spoke extremely well. And it was just really amazing. Thank you for bringing that up. I wanted to ask you this, because obviously like you mentioned teaching education was a big part of your background. How could like business leaders or business owners learn from teachers? Do you think these days a lot of people, and they look down on teachers saying, oh, like, so it's a low paying job, they may not be respected for what they do, but also they're extremely important in our society. But obviously I think there's a lot to learn from them. Can you maybe share with us maybe some key concepts that like business owners can learn from teachers?
Yeah, I was very blessed, Daniel. Many years ago, I was in a mastermind group, and one of the gentlemen in my mastermind, who was a very successful businessman, he asked me to train his sales team. And I said, I don't know if at the time I was a teacher, and I said, I don't know if I'm qualified to train your sales team. I've never been in sales. And he looked at me like I was a moron. He's, Danny, if you can get inner city teenage boys to read Shakespeare, I'm pretty sure you can motivate my sales team. And he did me a favor because he got me to expand what I was thinking I could do. When I'm working with people, I always say the riches are in the niches, and you should really niche down. And the way that you do that is you start with what you're comfortable with. When I first started speaking, I was very comfortable around teachers. So I trained teachers, and then I expanded that to working with the parents of students, to school administrators. And then Mark was the person that inspired me to start working with sales teams. And working with CEOs is actually quite similar to working with kindergartners. They have about a 7-minute attention span.
That's really funny. But also, so what you're saying also is that being in education helped you become a better speaker. And that is a very highly sought out, highly needed field these days. And I think a lot of people may not make that connection, because as a lot of teachers, they do a lot of speaking. Was that true in your career? Did you do a lot of speaking as a teacher? Did you go to a lot of conferences, events?
It wasn't really that. It was just, but every day I had an audience of all my students were forced to pay attention to me. And I had started off as a secondary teacher. Then they moved me to middle school, to upper elementary, to lower elementary, to pretty soon, instead of preparing students for college, I was coming home with snot marks all over my pants from my little ones hugging me all day. And what I learned is what works with a 12th grader does not necessarily work with a kindergartner, but what works with a kindergartner works with all age levels. And they kept me sharp. I had to be engaging, and they did me a huge favor, because working with any kind of audience is never a problem to me compared to working with little kids. And as a leader, it's really helpful because it trains you as a teacher. You have to figure out, what kind of players do I have? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? How do I get them working together? And so those are the same lessons that any corporate team or any small business I've worked with have had to use as well.
So now that you have all these different jobs and careers, and you work with hundreds of people, maybe more, even thousands of people at this point, in your opinion, what separates a good leader from a good leader from a great one in the business world?
I've never liked the term servant leader, because by definition, a leader is the servant. My pastor has a great way of saying it. He said, humility isn't thinking less of yourself. Humility is thinking of yourself less. And the best leaders I've been around, they're able to inspire their teams. They're never going to ask their team to do something that they wouldn't be willing to do on their own. And those to me are the great leaders. So you look at examples of George Washington, used to always get down with his forces. There's an anecdote about this major was commanding his troops to dig a trench, and they were slow, and he kept on yelling at them. And so this guy got off his horse and started helping everybody dig the trench. He's, thank you. What's your name? He's George. And George Washington, he was the commander of the entire forces, and basically told the major, if you're going to ask your men to do it, maybe you should do it as well. So there's a good lesson to be learned there. And what I love working with leaders on, we take their personal experiences and transform them into powerful business stories. This is something that everybody in your audience can do. Later on, sit in a comfortable chair with a pen and paper, libation of choice, and for an hour, I want you just to sit down and write down every story that has ever happened to you in your life. And I don't mean the entire story. I just mean triggers, like the time I locked myself out of the car in front of Costco, the time Dad spilt mustard on his tie when we were at that fancy restaurant. You'll find that you can easily come up with 500 anecdotes like this in about an hour. That's the first part of the exercise. The second part of the exercise is then I want you to think about, what's this story really about? Oh, this is a story about never giving up. Oh, this is a story about being trustworthy. Oh, this is a story of love. And so when I'm helping people create presentations, we're looking for what are the different emotions you want your audience to go through, or the actions you want them to go through. On my computer, I literally have hundreds of files with these emotions and characteristics. And then I have probably thousands of stories that demonstrate these things. And that's what we'll work on when I'm working with a leader on their speech.
So you mentioned before about the importance of having good communication, especially with reading and writing. And is there any like particular business books you think like every business owner should read?
Of course, everybody should be reading. There's all kinds of great books out there, but I've always believed that the fastest way to grow your business is through speaking. And there's lots of different stages out there nowadays. Your podcast is a stage. There's actual physical stages you could be speaking in front of. There's two ways you get better as to becoming a speaker. And most of the people I work with aren't speakers. A lot of them are terrified of speaking or have no interest in speaking, but they know it's really going to help them grow their business. And I always say, the two ways you get better at speaking is, first of all, you need to watch lots of speakers. I watch probably 10 speakers a day. I watch comedians. I watch politicians. I watch televangelists. I watch them in front of big groups, in front of small groups, in front of men, in front of women. Here, I'll give a ninja strategy for your audience. I watch a lot of televised award shows. And the reason is, when the person wins the Academy Award, they only have 45 seconds to connect with their audience. I want to see how they use their time. Now, most people waste their time. They get up there and want to thank God, I want to thank the Academy. It's stupid. Nobody's paying attention. But every now and then, somebody does a superb job. So a few years ago, there was a gentleman by the name of Joe Walker who won the Academy Award for Best Film Editing. Now, Daniel, this is the Academy Awards. All the important people in Hollywood are in the front, actors. And the camera's scanning the crowd, and you can see they're not paying attention. This is film editing. And Joe Walker gets up there, and he's British. He speaks very slowly and deliberately. He says, a lot of people don't know this, but when phrased properly, the term Academy Award nominee can be used as an insult. Now the camera's scanning the audience, people leaning in. What's he talking about? And he says, for example, yesterday, I got in an argument with my 17-year-old daughter, and she said, Academy Award nominee Joe Walker. All of a sudden, you see everybody laughing hysterically. He gets off stage. Denzel Washington wants to meet him. Sandra Bullock wants to meet him. Brad Pitt wants to meet him. Time magazine said it was one of the highlights of the Academy Awards that year. That's the power of connecting within 45 seconds. So the first way you get better at speaking is watching a lot of other speakers. The second way you get better is, I've been blessed to have lots of wonderful mentors throughout my career. One of my mentors was a guy by the name of Jim Rohn, and Jim used to say, you can't pay other people to do your push-ups. Translation, you got to do the work. You got to speak. Even the smallest towns in America have a Lions Club, an Optimist Club, a Rotary Club, a Kiwanis Club. They got schools, they got churches, temples, synagogues, they got chambers of commerce. I was working with a guy about 3 years ago, Jason. Jason was driving me crazy, Daniel. 22 years old, total Debbie Downer. Oh, I don't know anybody. I can't find a stage. Maybe I can't stand people like that. Finally, I said, Jason, do you have a Facebook account? He's like, yeah. We're going on Facebook Live right now. You're going to deliver the speech we just wrote for you. He gets all nervous. I'm like, no, we're going on right now. We had just put together his 45-minute talk. He gave it on Facebook Live. One woman from Ontario, Canada, accidentally watched him. And guess what, Daniel? He stunk. Asked him to do it again the next day. I didn't watch him the next day. He said 3 people watched him, and guess what? He stunk. But he didn't stink as bad as he did the first time. Here's the reason I give Jason as an example. He's gone on Facebook Live every single day for the last 3 years. He now has 6,000 people in his Facebook community. And last year he sold them almost $1 million worth of products, which is what he's all excited about. The reason I'm excited about him is because he was consistent. He did the work. A lot of people, how many of your friends, Daniel, say, oh, I'm going to do a podcast someday, but they don't ever do anything. You did that. You should be very proud of that. And I guarantee you it's the same thing for you. The first time you did your podcast, you stunk. The second time you stunk, but not as bad. And now this is like a finely oiled machine. You know exactly what you're doing. You're very comfortable. It's the same thing with speaking. And people that are nervous about speaking, I'm like, this is a skill. We can teach you so that you're not going to be nervous. And even if you are nervous, you're in good company. Barbara Streisand, she still vomits before she goes on stage to sing. Bill Russell, the former center for the Boston Celtics, he always vomited before basketball games. President Reagan vomited before every speech he ever gave. So you're in good company if you're nervous going on stage. That, again, I'm giving you very long answers to your short questions, but there's my roundabout for you.
So if there's like business owners or entrepreneurs out there that have a fear of speaking, because people say that a fear of speaking is one of the biggest fears that people have. What's like the best way, like your advice to these people to get started to overcome that fear?
Yeah, it's Jerry Seinfeld has the funny joke where he says, Americans' number one fear is public speaking. Number two is death. So if you ever go to a funeral, more people would rather be in the casket than delivering the eulogy based on the fear factor. And again, most people are scared to be on stage. It's just like anything with practice. I was in India speaking to a school and all the kids came up to me afterwards. They were all pumped up, saying, oh, I love you, or whatever. And then I look and there's this little boy, he's about 6 years old. He's looking up at me and he has tears in his eyes. And I notice he's missing his left arm. And he's like, how can I succeed? And so I get down to his eye level. And I say, when I was your age, I went to 18 different schools before I was 12. Everybody called me stupid because I stuttered. And eventually I went to a school where a teacher worked with me one-on-one and she would sing things to me. And I found I could sing them back without my stutter. It's kind of like the movie The King's Speech. And I lost my stutter and I became a swan. But I looked at that boy right in the eyes. I say, isn't it interesting that the little boy everybody used to make fun of and say he was stupid because he couldn't talk right, now gets paid ridiculous sums of money to travel the planet to do what? And he gets the biggest grin on his face. He's like, speak. I'm like, don't let anybody ever tell you what you cannot do. Anything's possible. And so I'm an encourager. When I'm coaching people, you're going to get a lot of love from me and encouragement. One of the easiest ways to break that fear is just find one person in your audience that has a smile on their face and just make it a one-on-one conversation. Just talk to that person. And then again, the other way you're going to get a lot better and more confident on stage is the more times you do it, you feel a lot more comfortable. So when I was in college, before one of my finals, I told the professor, I'm like, oh, I hope I do well on the final. And he looks at me and says, Danny, the time to place your bet is before the wheel's spinning. I hope you'd studied. And he's right. It's the practice that's going to make you feel a lot more confident on the stage.
Now, on your website, you mentioned that execution is more valuable than education. Can you elaborate with us? What exactly do you mean by that?
Whether I'm teaching my little ones or my older ones, as my students exit my classroom, they always have to bear with me as I give them the same refrain every single day. I always say, now, kids, remember, education is valuable, but execution is priceless. Knowledge is not power. Only applied knowledge is power. Knowing what the right thing to do and doing the right thing are two very different things. So let's go out, do the right thing, and make this world a better place. I believe that. And it's really one of the principles I'm trying to teach. There's way too many jerks in society now. People think they can just insult anybody with no consequences, and it's despicable to me. We need a lot more kindness, and I refuse to be around jerks. That's why I started my own speaking coaching business, because I've worked with some of the top speakers in the world. A lot of these people were just jerks. I'm like, I'm not going to all that. There's got to be, I think that's what separates me from a lot of people. When what I'm teaching people how to do is to create what I call a well-crafted story. My business partners are Coach Jimmy Hayes Nelson and Dave Ward. I call us the professor, the performer, and the producer, because my background is academia. Coach Jimmy came from Broadway, and Dave used to be an attorney. We work really well together, but we were fed up with the companies we were working with. One company we would get 50 executives in a room, and the company was charging them $15,000 for a 2-day training in which we helped them put together their speech, which was all fine and good. But after they left, how many of them actually delivered the speeches? And those that did deliver the speeches, I started noticing that they weren't doing it correctly. They had the elements, but they weren't putting them in the right place. And I believe that coaching should be an ongoing relationship. And the other thing I really can't stand, Daniel, is so many people, they say, oh, you should talk about the most traumatic moment in your life. And there's 3 reasons why I refuse to do that. First of all, the world just survived a global pandemic. Everybody's had a lot of bad stuff happen to them. I don't think we need another sad story. I think we need more stories of hope in the world. Second of all, we're teaching you how to create a story presentation that you're going to deliver again and again. Do you really want to relive the worst moment of your life again and again? I have a friend, his daughter was killed in a school shooting. He's told that story over 1,000 times. You got to be a lot stronger than me to talk about the worst day of your life again and again. And third, and this is where people get angry with me, I have one objective when I'm on stage. I want you to leave feeling better than when you came in. I want you laughing, smiling, happy. I think there's something admirable about that as a goal. I believe the people that tell the same sad story again and again, by the 20th time they're telling it, those are crocodile tears. And now they're being manipulative. And I'm not saying it's not an effective sales strategy. It's a very effective sales strategy. But I, for one, don't want to have to take a shower after I get off stage because I just manipulated my audience. There's actual ethical ways to get people to want to do more business with you. And so I'm not saying that you can't tell sad stories. It's just my criteria is if you give me a sad story, there better be a happy ending. I want to see the hope. I think audiences need hope.
You make a good point there, because there are some people that try to take advantage of people by creating these emotional hooks. Because good marketers know, I come from that field, know that like you can create these great emotional hooks and get real people to buy into whatever you're trying to sell them, because toying with their emotions, working with their, which he said is an effective sales and marketing strategy, but not always the most ethical. Can you maybe talk about, as all businesses have like highs and lows, different seasonality, so forth. How do you stay motivated in sometimes where things are going a little bit slow, or you may have a setback? Is there anything particular you do? Do you like a ritual or some mindset shift, or?
I don't really ever had those lulls. I basically practice what I preach. The reason I'm on podcasts all the time, I'm on stages all the time, is because it attracts much more interest in my business. The process that Coach Jimmy and I take our clients through is fairly straightforward, and I give it to people all the time. I'm sorry, I'm a former teacher, so everything has to be either alliteration or rhyme. And so we have what is called our 5 C's process. So before you do anything to put together a speech, you need clarity. And the 2 questions that you have to ask yourself, and you'd be amazed, 95% of our clients cannot answer one or both of these questions in a succinct manner. Those questions are, who is your audience? And so a lot of people say, oh, my audience is everybody. I'm like, if your audience is everybody, your audience is nobody. The riches are in the niches. So I was working with this woman, Kathy, and Kathy's amazing. So she's got the best niche I've ever heard in my life. She makes saddles for professional polo players. And I just laughed when she told me that. I'm like, that's great. That's a great niche. I'm like, how much money you make last year making saddles for professional polo players, Kathy? And she's like, about $800,000. And my jaw dropped. I'm like, I need to learn how to make saddles for professional polo players. I'm like, it's amazing how there's so many different things you can make money. And I just thought that was brilliant. That was her niche. Now, you can always expand your niche, and I already demonstrated that for you. I started by speaking to teachers, and I moved to parents, administrators, to now a broader community. But I focused in, you see it with writers all the time. John Grisham and Scott Turow, they were lawyers. So what do? They write legal thrillers. Toni Morrison's an African-American woman, so she'd write books that appeal to African-American women. That's smart. And you can always broaden your audience, but you want to start small when you figure out who is your audience. The second question you need to ask yourself is, what's the problem that I solve? And the biggest mistake a lot of people have with this is they don't say problems, they talk about their solutions. And the reason you want to talk about problems is you need your audience to relate to you. They don't care about your solution. All they care about is their problem. How can I have my problem solved? So I was working with some fitness instructors, and I asked them, what's the problem that you solve? They said, healthy living is not a problem. That's a good thing. Maybe the problem that you solve is obesity. And they're like, oh, always phrase it in a way that's going to relate much more quickly to your audience. So once you answer those two questions, you have clarity. And don't get me wrong, we usually craft one specific story for our clients, but if you have different audiences and different solutions, then you would have different well-crafted stories. I have 50 different talks. My talk for children is not the same as my talk for professional athletes or business people. Those are all different talks. And then the next C is connect. Connecting with your audience. And this is the most important part of your presentation. How am I going to connect? I gave you the example of Joe Walker at the Academy Awards. I'm a big fan of humor. I think humor is one of the best ways to connect with your audience. I like how Coach Jimmy phrases it. He says, you got to do the three gotta. And again, I'm a teacher, so you got to RAP. So RAP stands for relatability, authority, and purpose. Relatability is you have to show the audience that you're just like them. Authority is you also have to show, hey, I've had the problem that you have, but I solved it. And then purpose is, and this is why I do what I do, because I want to help people just like you, because I've been where you've been at. If you can do that in the first 5 minutes of your presentation, you're going to do a much better job of connecting with your audience. Then you get to the largest part of your talk, which is the content portion of your presentation. This is the teaching portion of your presentation. Ironically, even though it's the longest part of your presentation, it's probably the least important, because lots of research shows the primacy and recency effect. People remember the beginning of your talk and the end of your talk. They don't remember anything in between. Translation, the bun is more important than the burger. So make sure you're connecting with your audience at the beginning and end of your talk, because what they are going to remember is if you're helpful. And I think you have a responsibility on stage, whether people decide to take the next step with you or not, to serve your audience. So as long as you're serving and helping them, giving them some quick wins and also showing them how they can get some long-term wins, you're doing a good job. The next C is your call to action. This is another, I think probably the two biggest mistakes I see in most presentations happen in the connection and the call to action. The connection, a lot of people like to brag at the beginning. Give you an example. We were working with a gentleman by the name of Richard. He's a financial planner. And he used to start off his talk, I've been in the industry for 30 years. I've made my clients over $1 billion. I worked with this famous person. I said, time out, Richard. What are the three most important elements of real estate? Location. It's all right to brag, but you're doing it at the wrong part of your presentation. And so now we crafted a story with him where he talks about the very first client he booked 30 years ago, which it's a comedy of errors. He made every mistake possible. I have no idea why this person invested money with him. And he noticed it right away. He said his audiences went from being skeptical about him to now they're laughing with him, and he's booking more. And this is all I care about is, are you booking more clients as a result of the story that we put together? So Brene Brown talks about this. She's a wonderful speaker. She talks about vulnerability. I always tell people, stop talking about your successes, start talking about your failures, because not everybody in your audience has succeeded, but they've all failed. And the more you share your own failures, the more your audience is going to see themselves in you. So that is the number one mistake I see in the connection part. The number two mistake I see is in the call to action. People have multiple calls to action. I was on a podcast earlier today, and the hostess, she ended her podcast. She said, I hope you enjoyed today's show. Make sure you like, subscribe, and give us a 5-star review. And we got off the air, and I said, you just told your audience to do 3 different things. They ain't going to do any of them. It's basically Trader Joe's. People don't know this, but Trader Joe's is the number one grocery store in America based on sales volume. And the reason is, if you go to whatever your regional supermarket is, a Kroger, a Publix, Ralph's, Smith's, King Soopers, whatever it is in your area, when you go to buy mustard, there's 38 different types of mustard to choose from. You go to a Trader Joe's to buy mustard, there's mustard. Choices confuse and cause you to lose. There you go. I'm a teacher. I always have to rhyme it. So you got to get people focused in on what's your one clear call to action. And then finally, and this is another mistake I see, is people always end their presentations with their call to action. You're missing a huge opportunity. First of all, if you went over time, a lot of people are leaving before they even listen to all of your call to action. But I think a very well-crafted story always ends with an emotional close that's inspiring, that gets people to want to not consider doing business with you. I want them running and tearing their hair out because they're so eager to work with you. There's basically two types of people in every audience. I'll be stereotypical and say it's the married couple. The guy is the Joe Friday. He has his arms crossed. What's this going to cost? How much do I have to do? What's the result I'm going to get? And it's very important to serve the needs of the Joe Friday in your audience. But you also have the wife. I call her the Julia Roberts. Julia Roberts, she doesn't care what you're selling. She just wants to feel good. Will it make me feel good? I'm tired of feeling bad. I want to feel good. And a really well-crafted story appeals to both those Joe Fridays and those Julia Roberts in the audience. So there you go. Here's your 5C process. And I love getting people the formula. And I can tell you the formula works. Again, when I was in India at the beginning of my trip, I was just there to visit schools. And all of a sudden I'm in one school, the principal opens up a door. There's 5,000 kids in an auditorium and like 20 newspapers and 5 TV stations. He says, oh, for the next hour, Dr. Brassell is going to teach us the 3 secrets to reading better. Whoa, Daniel, nobody's told me I'm speaking and I have no such speech. But I got 5,000 kids. I got media there. Fortunately, it's India. I'm like sweating to death. And I decided to slow down my speech for my Indian audience. I'm like, today, I am going to teach you the 3 secrets to reading better. Who wants to learn the 3 secrets to reading better? And the kids are going wild. And in my head, I'm like, what the heck are the 3 secrets to reading better? And using the same 5C format that I just shared with you, with 30 seconds, I came up with a speech, delivered it for an hour, went to 1.5 billion people. And one of my companies is based on that speech off the top of my head.
Thank you for sharing that story. That's really interesting. Just to show that it's always important to be, you have to be ready for anything. You never know when you'll be asked to speak, and the importance of having good speaking skills, because it definitely is very important in the business world.
Yeah, another example of that was I was at a conference once. I wasn't there to speak. I was there to coach a couple of people. And the guy I was sitting next to is a pretty famous athlete. And the conference organizer, she saw him and she invited him up on the stage. Said, tell us what you've been doing. You got 7 minutes to tell us what you've been up to. And that was an important lesson for me, Daniel. I'm like, ooh, I need a 7-minute version of my talk because you never know when somebody's going to ask you to speak in front of 1,200 people. I need a 45-minute version. I need a 30-minute version. I need a 20-minute, 15, 7, 3, 30 seconds. I need different versions. And it's with the Cub Scouts always said, be prepared. Be prepared. It'll make you a lot less nervous when you're comfortable jumping into the fire like that.
In their point of view, what makes a speech more memorable?
There's lots of different ways that you can be memorable as a speaker, Daniel. One of the easiest ways is with props. There aren't enough people using props. Many years ago, I watched Meg Cabot deliver a speech. So Meg Cabot, she wrote The Princess Diaries, and she showed up wearing a tiara, and her opening line was, why am I always the only person wearing a tiara in the room? It got us all laughing, but that speech was 25 years ago. I remember that. One of my mentors was a guy named Zig Ziglar, and Zig used to always bring this water pump with him. And you can talk to anybody that ever saw Zig speak. They'll always talk about the water pump. You can just use your clothes as a way of branding. I have a friend and he wears all red all the time. And so people remember him as the red guy. What am I doing? I was at an event with all these really famous athletes, and the last 2 speakers were Mary Lou Retton and Peter Vidmark. They both won the 1984 gold medal in gymnastics at the Olympics. And the way they end their speeches, they do a backflip. And I'm like, oh, I need to learn how to do a backflip. That's awesome. One of my favorite speakers of all time was John Wooden, the former UCLA basketball coach. And even at age of 100, he'd be giving speeches where he used poetry throughout. And I remember so many of his poems, and I was like, wow, that's a really good way to stand out, is just, here's a little poem. Humor. I'm a big fan of humor. People remember jokes and things. It's actually biblical, to tell you the truth. This is why I tell people the importance of storytelling is if you're reading the Bible, Jesus is getting frustrated with his apostles all the time. He's all right, you guys are dense. Let me tell you a story. Okay. There's this prodigal son. So people know that or even in the Old Testament, you got like David and Goliath. You don't even have to, it doesn't matter what religion you are in the world. People know the story of David and Goliath, but this is interesting. I bet you I'm just going to pick on the Christians right now. I bet you 9 out of 10 Christians couldn't tell you what the 10 commandments are. And the reason is because they're presented in the Bible as a list, not as a story. People remember stories. They don't remember lists. And so this is what I'm always trying to emphasize to my clients is what can you do to be memorable? And a lot of it is a story. And it can be, again, if you're going to tell a sad story, it's just my personal preference is there has to be a happy ending. It's why I like going to American movies as opposed to French movies, because if Julia Roberts dies in the middle of the movie in America, I know that they're going to resuscitate her and she'll be alive by the end of the movie. If they kill her in the middle of a French film, I turn to my wife, I'm like, I think she's dead. This is depressing. I don't want to be depressed. Life's too short as it is. I was watching a horrible show on TV the last week. It was called The News. It put me in a bad mood because it's so depressing. I'm like, I don't need that. I'm going to watch comedies and things like that. So if you're going to be memorable, there's all kinds of different simple techniques. I sing in my presentations and I like using poems and things like that. But physical props, again, the way you dress, how you use your stage, there's all kinds of different ways, little strategies to be memorable.
So what role I've done like a lot of different things. How is it like personal branding help grow your own business? Has branding been a big part of your own personal branding, been a big part of your own business growth?
Yeah. In terms of personal branding, I think really this would be the thing I would share with your audience is be more authentic. I have a friend, he teaches people how to be authentic. I'm like, if you have to teach people, I don't know if they're being really authentic. Be you, do you. I've always had a saying, if you're not funny, don't tell jokes. But if you're not, some people just aren't fun. But you can even humor. So I was working with some engineers in Silicon Valley, and one of the guys, the sweetest Indian man ever. I can't tell you. I got to give him a different name. He had a very difficult name to pronounce, and he was just so worried. He had to give a speech. He's like, Danny, please make me funny. I need people to pay attention to me. And so the way. I'm very good at adding humor to presentations. And so now he starts his presentation and it gets people to smile in the audience. You don't have to be a stand-up comedian. You just have to get people smiling. The easiest way to introduce humor in your presentation is to make fun of yourself. And that's what he did there. The more you make fun of yourself, the more people are going to, if you watch the best comedians, they do it better than anybody. Kevin Hart's a short black guy, so he makes a lot of jokes about being a short black guy. Jim Gaffigan's a big fat white guy, so he makes a lot of jokes about being a big fat white guy. When you take your perceived weakness and show it on yourself, you've actually turned it into a strength and people can't even do anything. I work with politicians. I didn't work with President Biden or President Trump. And somebody had asked me, what would you have advised both of them? And I said, if I had worked with President Biden, I would have made fun of my age. I can't remember anything. I don't remember anything. I'm an old man. Because if you make fun of yourself like that, people aren't going to go after you on it. You've just taken away the issue. If I was advising President Trump, I'd say, make fun of your humility. Nobody is humbler than me. I'm the most humble person. You can't make fun of it if you're pointing it out. And it's just human nature. It's actually, Coach Jimmy illustrates this all. He talks about the end of the movie 8 Mile. The end of the 8 Mile with Eminem, I'm going to establish how white I am because I don't know what it's called. They have a rap off. And so it's Eminem and the black guy. And Eminem's friends are like, oh man, he's going to diss you. He's going to say that you live in a trailer and that your mom's a crack hoe and that he slept with your girl. And so he starts off, he looks at the guys, you going to say that I live in a trailer, that my mom's a crack hoe, that you slept with my girl. And the black guy doesn't know what to say now. He just took away every issue he was going to put him down on. There's strength in there. And this is what I love about working with people is if you're nervous, show people that you're nervous. I'm completely nervous. Just say, I'm terrified, because contrary to popular belief, audiences actually are in your corner. They want you to succeed because you've been there, Daniel. There's nothing worse than watching a person bomb on stage. Like nothing worse. Ooh, we're both in this together, man. I hope you feel good enough to give a good presentation. So audiences, especially when you acknowledge something, they're gonna cheer you on. If you say you're nervous, I guarantee there's gonna be people. No, you can do it. You can do it. People are cool that way.
So you talk a lot about like bringing humor like on stage. And I understand that it's funny, you make people laugh, being more memorable. What does that help with the bottom line business numbers in terms of like increasing sales?
Yeah. Again, what you're trying to do is connect. And I've always thought that humor is the best way to build connection. It makes people happy and happy. What's the saying is, here, I should be able to remember this is people who cry don't buy. People, I can't remember the other part, and I'm forgetting the part that makes you laugh or whatever, but I just find, and this is really all I'm measuring when I'm working with people. If people give you a standing ovation, that's great. If people say you're a great a great speaker, that's great. But the only way I'm measuring my effectiveness is how many people are deciding to take the next step with you. It could be an unpaid next step, subscribe to my podcast or book a free phone call. It can be a paid offer like buy my product or invest in my coaching. All I'm looking for is how many people are going to increase that working with you. So again, I'll go back to Richard. So Richard, the financial planner, the way he gets clients is twice a week. He has these presentations at fancy steak restaurants. He invites like 15 couples in their 50s they get a free steak dinner, but they got to watch him for an hour. And it was interesting because he said, now it used to be the guy always had his arms crossed. What's this guy trying to sell me? And he averaged of the 15 couples, maybe 6 of them would book a consultation with him afterwards. Now that he's changed the story, and it's a funny story, now he's averaging 12 of the 15 are booking a consultation. It's because this is somebody they want to be around. People want to be around fun people. They don't want to be around depressing people. And that's where I see humor is your strength. Whenever I give political examples, it has nothing to do with the politics. It's just the speaking style or whatever. President Reagan was just a master at getting people. He used humor as a strength. So in the 1984, the very first debate with Vice President Mondale, the moderator kept on asking President Reagan questions and he couldn't remember the numbers and the statistics. He looked confused. And so the second debate, the very first question the moderator asked is, President Reagan, you looked confused that last debate. Is age going to be an issue in this campaign? And President Reagan's, I am not going to make age an issue in this campaign. I am not going to point out to the American public my opponent's youth and inexperience. He got Vice President Mondale laughing. I'm like, man, he won the election just with that line. That's the power of humor. People don't realize. I knew this as a journalist. The people that were actually the strongest journalists were the political cartoonists. Because it stuck with people. People remember, when you watch a political cartoon of Bill Clinton always had a Bubba chin. He always had the Bubba chin. Ross Perot always had really big ears. It was like, those things stick with people. They start to remember that. And I've always thought that humor is a great tool to connect with people and to grow your business. And even commercials, when I watch ads, I like the funny ads. I don't like the depressing ad. It doesn't matter what the company is. It could be a car company or Cheetos or whatever. I'm always looking for, that's what beer companies do a better job than anybody of making people laugh during the ads because they don't take themselves. Even as a teacher, I had a mission. I take my job seriously. I don't take myself seriously because I ain't all that and neither are you. And if you think you're all that, teach kindergarten for a week because those little ones will set you straight. When I was teaching kindergarten, I had a little girl, LaShonda, raises her hand one day. I'm like, LaShonda, what's your question? And she's, Miss Brassell, when are you going to trim your nose hair? Like this afternoon. Thanks for bringing that to my attention, LaShonda. I ain't all that. And I like laughing. Life's too short and I want to do business with people that I want to hang out with. And humor to me is a great way of doing that.
So you mentioned you worked with some big names. Can you maybe drop your name or two of maybe somebody famous?
I don't do that.
Or is that I
don't do that out of respect. I'll let you interview my partner, Coach Jimmy. I think it's because he was on Broadway. He loves to name drop all the time. I can assure you I've worked with some very famous people, but I like to be a little bit discreet. Not everybody wants people knowing that they've worked with a speaking coach, but I've worked with some very big people. Some were very nice, some were not so nice, but I will not reveal their names.
So can you maybe explain a little bit more about your offerings? How do you coach people to become a better speaker? Do you work with people one-on-one? Do you have a program? How's it?
Yeah, Coach Jimmy and I work with people one-on-one with companies. We tend to work as the team with him and Dave Ward, because again, Dave's just a master. He's our AI specialist. And people always ask, can I write a speech with AI? I'm like, absolutely. AI is a tool. I don't know why people think AI is a bad thing. When used, it was either Uncle Ben from Spider-Man or the Bible that said, with great power comes great responsibility. AI can be used as a bad tool, but it's a very good tool. I encourage people all the time. I use it to brainstorm ideas. Like if I'm trying to think of, okay, can you give me some stories on taking action? Oh, okay. Yeah. I have some ideas on some taking action stories. So I was working with this woman. She couldn't figure out a way to close her speech. And I'm like, what do you want your audience to do? And she said, I want to show them that they can't do it themselves. And I'm like, oh, you need to hire an expert story. And she said, yes, I need to hire an expert story. So I just modeled it for her. I said, okay. At the very end, I'm like, okay, take a deep breath. I'll leave you with this. Many years ago, my wife and I had theater tickets. We were dressed to the nines, all excited. As we were driving to the theater, though, we got a flat tire. And my wife said, oh, I'll call AAA. I'm like, you don't have to call AAA. I'm a man. I can fix a flat tire. So I opened up the trunk and I got the spare tire. And then I got the pumping thing that I guess it pumps up, I don't know, puts the car up. And then I got the big jack thing that you unscrew the nutset with. Basically, 27 minutes later, I have grease all over me. I haven't been able to change this dang flat tire. My wife is looking at me, shaking her head like I could have done so much better than this guy. Unbeknownst to me, Daniel, she'd actually called AAA. And this tow truck shows up, and this 17-year-old punk hops out of the tow truck and in 3 minutes flat, fixes the flat tire. I think there are times in life when all of us think we can do it ourselves. But if you want to save time, you want to save money, and you want to save a whole lot of headache and embarrassment, hire an expert. And so what I'm doing there is I'm alluding to the audience. I'm giving them a tale that has nothing to do with what my sale is. So this woman, she was selling her fitness program. This has nothing to do with the fitness program. What it does do is it tells the audiences, oh, maybe I should get that fitness program because she knows a lot more about fitness than I do. That this is the power of stories. This is why we're always using stories. I just think it's the most effective way to do things. And I know I'm rambling because I'm like, I can't even remember the original question, Daniel, and I don't know if I actually answered the original question. What was the original question you
Tell us about your offerings. How do you work with people?
Oh, yeah. So we work with everybody. I work one-on-one. I work with small groups, but I think what separates me from a lot of people is I'm basically your lifetime coach because I don't get fulfillment just out of cash in the check. I get fulfillment out of watching my people succeed. I got people that I've been coaching now for 15 years. We're on like their 80th speech because I just want to see you succeed. Like there's nothing for even when I was a coach, I just love watching the growth. And I think everybody needs somebody in their corner. So my students I'm always in their corner. As a thank you to you, Daniel, and your audience for having to listen to me today, I did want to give everybody some freebies. So if you go to freestoryguide.com, guide like a tour guide, freestoryguide.com, I'm going to give everybody their own complimentary, well-crafted story blueprint. What this is the actual process that Coach Jimmy and I take our clients through on how to create your well-crafted story. What this does for you is it takes away the guesswork at why did I put this in this part of the presentation and what's the purpose for that? What this means for you is the peace of mind that I'm not going to have to waste a lot of money on advertising and social media strategies that I still don't even comprehend. I have an ultimate sales tool that's going to get me more and more clients for eternity. You can get that at freestoryguide.com. And I just really want to thank you, Daniel, for having me today. I love what you're doing. I love what you're about. You're a person that dives in head first, and we need a lot more people like that rather than the people that are just trying to test the waters with their toes.
Thank you very much for your compliments. I really appreciate it. If somebody is interested in working with you, what's the best way they can reach out to you or connect?
No, if they go to freestoryguide.com, I'm sure it puts you on some kind of email list for the rest of your life. So I'm sure it seems that. My name is Danny Brassell. I always tell people my last name's really easy to remember how to spell. It's spelled like Brassell. No, I never took any grief over that as a child. But if you get the freestoryguide.com, that'll take you there. And yeah, I'm sure it puts you in some kind of funnel that you'll never be able to escape for eternity.
Wonderful. Danny, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all about your interesting experiences and all your wisdom. And I definitely love all the humor. I personally love that.
Good. Thank you, Danny.
I really enjoy it. So it definitely makes my job as a host a lot easier. You said you talk to somebody that's brings in humor versus someone who's like really dry and look at my watch. Great. Thank you so much for coming on the show and explain to everybody how they connect with you. Just wanted to say, this is really wonderful. I really enjoyed today's conversation. I'm sure a lot of people in the audience will too.
Thank you, Daniel. And remember, education is valuable, but execution is priceless. Put it into action, folks.